There's a version of you that nothing can shake. Not bad news, not other people's opinions, not failure, not chaos. A version of you that walks into difficult situations with steady hands and a clear mind. Not because life got easier, but because you got stronger. That version isn't a fantasy. It's not reserved for monks, philosophers, or people who've somehow figured out the secret to life. It's available to you right now, but only if you're willing to understand one thing that most people spend their entire lives running from. And here's the uncomfortable truth. The reason most people feel out of control isn't because their world is too much. It's because they've been trying to control the wrong things their entire lives. Stay with me, because what I'm about to share with you has the power to change not just how you start your mornings, but how you move through every single moment of your life. Let me paint you a picture. You wake up, it's early, the room is quiet. For maybe 3 seconds, 3 beautiful fleeting seconds, everything feels okay. And then it starts. The mental checklist kicks in. The inbox you haven't opened yet. The conversation you replayed 100 times last night. The thing someone said to you last Tuesday that still somehow stings. The future you're not sure you're building fast enough. The version of yourself you feel like you're falling behind. Before you've even moved a muscle, your mind is already 5 places at once, and none of them are here. Sound familiar? Here's what's actually happening in that moment, and this is important. Your nervous system doesn't know the difference between a real physical threat and a thought. When your brain starts running worst-case scenarios first thing in the morning, it triggers the same stress response as if something dangerous were literally standing in front of you. Cortisol floods your body. Your heart rate subtly increases. Your muscles tighten. Your thinking narrows. And suddenly, you're not making clear decisions. You're reacting. You're surviving. You're bracing. And the worst part? Most people have done this so many times, for so many years, that it doesn't even feel like a problem anymore. It just feels life. They think this is just how mornings go. This is just how adulting feels. This is just the price you pay for having responsibilities. But it isn't. It's a pattern, and patterns, no matter how long you've been running them, can be interrupted. The Stoics knew this, and they built an entire philosophy around the one skill that changes everything. About 2,000 years ago, a man named Epictetus sat down and wrote something so precise, so clear, so unflinching, that philosophers and psychologists are still citing it today. He said, "Of things, some are in our power, and others are not." That's it. That's the whole thing. Sounds almost too simple, right? But don't let the simplicity fool you, because most people spend their lives violating this principle every single day without ever realizing it. Here's what's in your power: your thoughts, your effort, your responses, your values, what you choose to focus on, how you treat people, what you decide to stand for. Here's what isn't: other people's behavior, their opinions of you, outcomes you can't guarantee, the economy, traffic, the weather, how fast things happen, whether people recognize your effort, whether life feels fair. Now think about how much mental energy you spend every single day on that second list. The anxiety about what people think of you, the frustration when things don't go as planned, the exhaustion of trying to manage situations you were never meant to manage, the anger at circumstances you cannot change. That's not strength. That's a leak. And It's draining you. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the world during his time, the Emperor of Rome, kept a private journal, not to show anyone, not to build a brand, just to remind himself daily of this same principle. In that journal he wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Think about that for a second. The man commanding the most powerful empire in the ancient world was writing daily reminders to himself not to waste energy on things outside his control. If he needed that reminder, how much more do we? Now let's bring this into the present, because this isn't just ancient wisdom. Modern neuroscience has mapped exactly what Epictetus was describing, and the data is striking. When your brain perceives a situation as threatening and uncontrollable, which is exactly what happens when you're trying to manage things outside your power, a region called the amygdala fires up. Think of it as your brain's alarm system. It's fast, instinctive, and incredibly powerful. The problem is, when the amygdala takes the wheel, the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for rational thinking, emotional regulation, and deliberate decision-making, essentially goes offline. In other words, the more you react, the less clearly you think. The more you try to control everything around you, the less control you actually have over yourself. Researchers call this amygdala hijack, a term coined by psychologist Daniel Goleman. And it's not just a bad mood. It physically impairs your judgment, your memory, your creativity, and your ability to connect with others. But here's where it gets interesting. Studies in cognitive behavioral therapy and mindfulness neuroscience have shown that the simple act of naming what is and isn't within your control, actively, consciously, verbally, reduces amygdala activation and re-engages the prefrontal cortex. You don't need medication. You don't need a retreat. You need a 2-second pause and a clear question. Is this mine to control? That pause is not passive. That pause is power. Because in that gap between stimulus and response, that tiny, invisible space lives every version of the person you're capable of becoming. Viktor Frankl, who survived the unimaginable horror of Nazi concentration camps, said it best. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. That space is what the Stoics were training every day, every morning, every difficult moment. And you can train it too. I want to tell you about a shift that happens when people genuinely internalize this principle. Not just intellectually, but in their bones. There's a specific kind of calm that starts to emerge. Not the fake calm of pretending things don't matter. Not the numb calm of disconnecting from life, but a deep, grounded stillness that comes from knowing exactly where your responsibility begins and ends. You stop performing. You stop over-explaining. You stop apologizing for things that were never your fault and obsessing over outcomes you could never have guaranteed. You start moving differently. There's less urgency in your voice, not because you care less, but because you've stopped confusing importance with anxiety. Things can matter deeply to you without consuming you. You start listening more. When you're not constantly managing your own internal storm, you actually have the bandwidth to show up for other people. Conversations become real. Connections deepen. And here's something that surprises a lot of people. You actually start performing better. Not despite releasing control. Because of it, when you stop white-knuckling outcomes you can't control, Your energy concentrates on the inputs you can control: your preparation, your effort, your presence, your quality of thinking. And paradoxically, that is what leads to better results. The Stoic Emperor Marcus Aurelius led one of the most turbulent periods in Roman history: wars, plagues, political betrayals. And historians note that his decision-making under pressure was remarkably clear, remarkably measured, remarkably wise. Not because his circumstances were calm, because he was. That's available to you, but it requires practice. Daily, deliberate, unglamorous practice. So, let's talk about how you actually build this. Not theory, practice. 5 pillars, each one a direct application of Stoic discipline, backed by modern behavioral science. Pillar 1, the morning audit. Before you reach for your phone, before you check a single notification, give yourself 90 seconds. Ask one question: what is actually within your control today? Not a goal list, not an anxiety spiral, just a clear, honest inventory. Your effort is yours. Your response to whatever happens, that's yours. Write it down if you need to. Say it out loud if that helps. What matters is that you make it conscious before the day gets loud. Neuroscience calls this implementation intention, pre-committing to how you'll respond before the situation arises. Research by psychologist Peter Gallwitzer found it increases follow-through on behavior by up to 91%. The Stoics called it the morning preparation. Both point to the same truth. How you prime your mind first thing shapes every decision that follows. Pillar 2, the pause protocol. Throughout your day, whenever you feel tension rising, that tightening in your chest, the rising voice in your head, the urge to react, stop. Not forever, just for 2 seconds. Breathe in through your nose for 4 counts. Hold for 2, out through your mouth for 6. That's not a breathing exercise. That's a neurological reset. That specific breathing pattern activates your parasympathetic nervous system, your body's physiological off switch for the stress response. It tells your amygdala, false alarm, and it hands the controls back to your prefrontal cortex. Then ask, is this within my power? If yes, act with full intention. If no, release. Not with resentment, with the quiet dignity of someone who knows where their energy belongs. Here's something that behavioral psychology has confirmed that the Stoics practiced intuitively. Behavior follows identity. If you see yourself as someone who reacts, you'll react. If you see yourself as someone who chooses, you'll choose. The most powerful thing you can do is build a clear internal picture of who you are under pressure, not who you wish you were, not who you perform as for others, but the core of you, grounded, deliberate, unshakable. James Clear, in his research on habit formation, writes that the most durable change comes not from motivation or willpower, but from identity shift. When you start saying, I am someone who responds, rather than reacts, your brain begins to look for evidence that this is true, and your behavior follows. Create a 1-sentence identity statement. Write it somewhere you'll see it. Something like, I am someone who chooses my response with intention. Simple, specific, repeatable. Most people carry yesterday into today because they never formally close the day. Every evening, 5 minutes, nothing more, sit down and ask yourself 3 questions. 1. What happened today that was outside my control? Name it. Don't judge it. Just see it clearly. 2. How did I respond? And was that response mine to own? 3. What would I do differently tomorrow? Knowing what I know now, this isn't self-punishment. This is what Seneca called the daily examination, a practice he credited with more personal growth than almost anything else in his life. It creates a clean separation between days. It lets you metabolize the experiences instead of dragging them forward unprocessed. Sleep becomes deeper, mornings become clearer, and over time, you start noticing patterns, the specific triggers that pull you off center, the situations where you default to reaction, the places where your discipline needs the most work. That awareness alone is more powerful than most self-help books. Pillar 5, voluntary discomfort. This one surprises people, but stay with me. The Stoics deliberately practiced hardship, not because they were masochists, but because they understood something modern behavioral science has now confirmed. Resilience is trained, not inherited. Epictetus told his students to practice small acts of voluntary discomfort regularly: cold water, skipping a meal, sitting in silence without distraction, not eating the dessert, getting up when it's hard, holding your tongue when every instinct says to speak. These aren't punishments, they're training. Neuroscientist Andrew Huberman and others researching stress inoculation have found that controlled voluntary exposure to mild discomfort builds what's called stress resilience, a higher tolerance for challenge, a faster recovery from setbacks, and crucially, a stronger sense of self-efficacy, the belief that I can handle hard things. Because when you know, not just believe, but know through lived experience that you can sit with discomfort without being destroyed by it, the things that used to shake you simply don't. You stop needing conditions to be perfect before you can feel okay. And that is freedom. Here's what I want you to understand beneath all of this. The Stoic path isn't about becoming cold. It isn't about suppressing emotion or pretending that pain doesn't exist. The Stoics felt everything. Marcus Aurelius grieved. Epictetus suffered. Seneca feared death. But they chose daily, intentionally, not to be ruled by what they felt. There is a profound difference between experiencing an emotion and being consumed by it, between noticing fear and being paralyzed by it, between feeling anger and being destroyed by it. Emotion is information. It tells you something matters. It tells you something needs attention. But emotion was never designed to be the decision maker. Carl Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." That's what unprocessed emotion does. It drives from the back seat while you think you're steering. The Stoic practice, the morning audit, the pause, the identity anchor, the evening release, the voluntary discomfort, all of it is designed for one purpose: to move what's unconscious into the light, to see your patterns clearly, to stop calling your conditioning your personality. Because you are not your reactions, you are not your anxiety, you are not the story your nervous system tells you when it's frightened. You are the awareness behind all of that, the observer, the one who can choose. And the moment you really, truly understand that, not just intellectually, but in your chest, in your breath, in the way you carry yourself, everything shifts. So let me leave you with this. Somewhere in your day today, maybe in 10 minutes, maybe in 10 hours, something is going to happen that tries to pull you off center. A message that stings, a situation that doesn't go as planned, a person who acts in a way you didn't expect, a moment where everything in you wants to react, to defend, to spiral. And in that moment, you'll have a choice. You can do what most people do: contract, react, hand your power over to the circumstance. Or you can pause, breathe, ask the question, and respond from the deepest, clearest, most grounded part of who you are. Not perfectly, not every time, but more often than yesterday. That's the work. That's the whole work. Marcus Aurelius wrote it plainly. Confine yourself to the present, not the regret of yesterday, not the anxiety of tomorrow. The present, this breath, this choice, this moment, is where your power lives. The Stoics didn't promise you a life without storms. They promised you something far more valuable: a mind that knows how to sail through them. Save this video. Come back to it on the days when the noise gets loud and the ground feels unsteady. Share it with someone who's been carrying more than they should. And remember, you were never meant to control everything. You were only ever meant to master one thing: yourself. That's where it begins. That's where it ends. And that's everything.